Hogwarts Gene-Splicing Prodigy, Magical Creatures Meets Sci-Fi. Episode 81, Mrs. Derek, Peter's Blackmail? After knocking on the door of the office, Snape opened the door for Peter, and the moment he came in, he whispered comfortably, "I'm on the side, don't worry about what she will do." Peter nodded gratefully at Snape, and followed him inside. At the entrance, I saw Derek and a middle-aged ladylike woman sitting on the sofa. Snape introduced Peter, "This is Mrs. Derek, Derek's mother. She wants to negotiate with you about cancelling the report on Derek to the school." Then Snape said to Mrs. Derek with a blank face, "Mrs., you'd better keep the story short. What compensation did you decide to use to distract Mr. York?" Mrs. Derek, wearing a dark green gown, looked at Peter arrogantly, with a gloomy look in her eyes, and then smirked and said, "Mr. York, I heard Derek say you are from the Muggle world. I don't know. What do you want in order to drop the prosecution against Derek?" Seeing her demeanor, Peter directly used the aristocratic face he had not used for a long time. His temperament changed dramatically. He elegantly turned the remaining old chair into a gorgeous armchair, and then used a more arrogant one than her. Looking at Mrs. Derek, she smirked, "After all, Derek used black magic to sneak up on me first. I don't know how, madam, you want to solve it? First of all, I'm not a cat or a dog that can be dismissed at will. Don't try to make me give up the right of prosecution for a small profit, or you can make him prepare to leave school now. Because I will think about Principal Dumbledore after I leave the office and explain this. I don't think he should. A dangerous person who uses black magic and attacks classmates will be kept in school." 99. You. Mrs. Derek was caught by Peter's demeanor and tone at this time, and stood up directly. She didn't expect to be replied by a dirty mudblood in her eyes. Instantly, murderous intent appeared in her eyes, as if to use a spell at any time. "Mrs. Derek, please calm down. You don't want to be imprisoned in Azkaban for attacking the child," Snape said coldly. He was standing between Peter and Mrs. Derek, a defensive look looks like. When Mrs. Derek saw Snape, fear flashed in her eyes, and she took a deep breath to calm herself down as much as possible. Then he smirked again and said, "Of course not, Snape. I'm the master of the pure-blood Derek family, and of course I won't care about a child." Then he sat down again, and looked at Peter with a cold smile on his face. "What, a child with sharp teeth? How about I give you 1,000 gold galleons? This is a huge sum of money. The expression that you made a lot of money." Peter sneered, looked at her like an idiot, and said, "I don't have more pocket money in Gringotts. Are you sending beggars? Or I'll use the same magic on your son. Try it, then I'll give you 2,000 galleons. How? You filthy mudblood. How dare you speak to me in such a tone? You have to be careful, don't run around, or one day you may be found dead in some corner. It's a pity that you have such a white face," Madame Derek said in a rage, directly and coldly, looking at the boy in front of her with her eyes fixed. "Madam, are you threatening my students? It seems that today's negotiation was unsuccessful. If you have nothing to do next, please leave the school. Hogwarts does not allow outsiders to stay long," Snape said firmly. Derek was a little anxious when he saw this situation. He didn't want to be expelled from school, so he took his mother's hand and said anxiously, "Mom, he likes magic books. Don't we have a lot of magic books at home? Can give him some books. I don't want to be fired." Mrs. Derek looked at the silly son in front of her, and then looked aside whether it was her appearance, temperament, or the momentum she had just competed with herself, all of which were different from other mudbloods, and suddenly felt that she was born wrong. She is not one of those poor people who only sell magic books from sellers. She knows that these magic books are the heritage of a family. They are the knowledge accumulated by the ancestors for hundreds of years and generations. So she can't say anything. Agree with this stupid idea. But Peter said at this time, "I don't want any Jean Galleon, I just want your family's magic books. If we agree, we can sign an agreement. But if we don't agree, don't waste any more time. You can go for Derek first. Tidy up and wait to be fired. Why don't you go grab it?" "Mrs. Derek roared, as if to strangle the hateful boy in front of him, and then discussed it. "How about 5,000 gold galleons? This is already the money we can come up with. As for the magic book, it is impossible. You are a little wizard from Muggle, and you are not afraid of dying." Peter sat on the chair with an innocent expression and spread his hands. "Robbery is not so easy. So what's your final decision? If it doesn't work, I'll leave first. I still have the activities of the spell club in the evening." Mrs. Derrick looked at her son's pleading look, and finally gritted her teeth and said, "Then give you a magic book. And it's a duplicate copy. And you have to swear not to publish the contents of the book." Peter looked at her like an idiot and said, "One book? You're joking. Ask your son. After my duel with Carlson Earl won, Earl promised me 5 copies. The only magic book. And you want to kill me with 1 copy?" Mrs. Derrick looked at her son and saw her nodding. She immediately scolded the Earl family. She couldn't help but grit her teeth and said, "Then we will also give you 5 magic books. Is that all right?" Peter shook his head. "I had a fair duel with Earl, and he took 0 copies of the only one. And yours is only a copy, so you must compensate for 10 copies. 35. Impossible, you are extorting. I will not do what you want." Mrs. Derrick directly and resolutely disagreed. "Well, it seems that we can't agree." Peter looked indifferent, then got up and nodded to Snape, as if he was about to leave. "If that's the case, then please allow me to leave first." A smile flashed in Snape's eyes, and he agreed calmly, "Then you go first." Dang 3.2 Brighter should be in the headmaster's office. When Derek saw this, he pulled his mother in panic and said, "Mom, you promise. Isn't it just 10 magic books? Just give him. I don't want to be fired." 35. Peter walked steadily, and when he opened the door and one foot was already stretched out, there was a voice behind him, "I promise." With a smile on Peter's face at the door, he turned around and asked with a smile, "Madam, are you sure you agreed, not fooling me?" Mrs. Derrick had a gloomy face, nodded her head a little dejectedly. Her eyes were so wicked that she seemed to be swallowing him up, and she said with difficulty, "I agree to exchange 10 copies of the magic book in exchange for Mr. York to cancel the prosecution of Derek." 5. Peter said happily, "If that's the case, then ask Madam to sign a magic contract with me. How about the unbreakable curse?" Episode 82. Sign the contract, the unbreakable curse. Mrs. Derrick was stunned and said with an embarrassed expression, "You are going to use the unbreakable curse for a few magic books. This is ridiculous." Peter looked at Mrs. Derrick with a smile and said, "I'm not afraid that you will fill up some books that are not unique, or deliberately add, delete, and modify the books, and then hand them over to me. If the content of the magic books is not rigorous, it is easy to cause an accident, and if it is serious, it will die. I don't want to gamble with my own life." 99. Mrs. Derrick seemed to have been told, and her face became more gloomy. She did not expect this mudblood from the Muggle world to be so difficult. She said with difficulty, "Okay, I agree to sign the unbreakable charm." Peter smiled contentedly, and he turned to Snape and said, "Professor, you should know this spell. I want you to be our witness." Snape looked at Peter with complex eyes. The boy was in control of the situation from beginning to end, and the arrogant Mrs. Derrick finally agreed. "It's hard to believe he's just a kid." He walked forward silently, took out his wand, pointed at the two, and asked again, "Are you sure you want to sign this unbreakable curse? If you don't do it, the party who breaches the contract will be killed by the curse backlash." 35. Peter is the beneficiary, of course, nodding happily. Mrs. Derrick wanted to go back on it, but in the face of her only son's request, she couldn't help but refuse, so both parties agreed. The unbreakable charm was not complicated. The two sides reached out and shook hands. Snape, who was a witness, pointed at them with his wand and recited the spell, and then a blood-colored light enveloped the two of them. The content of the agreement between the two parties is not too complicated. Peter asked the other party to provide him with a copy of the 10 copies of the magic book, and he was not allowed to do anything. On the other hand, Derek asked Peter that after he got the magic book, he could no longer hold Derek for sneak attack with black magic. Matter. With the signing of the contract, the red light turned into 2 red threads and disappeared around the wrists of both parties, leaving only a light-colored trace to remind the contract. Okay, the contract is signed. As long as the two sides complete the agreement, the contract will have no effect on anyone. Snape put away his wand and explained to Peter. As soon as the contract was signed, Mrs. Derrick immediately withdrew the hand she held with Peter, her face full of disgust as if it was stained with dirt. Peter smiled, ignoring her attitude. He is very happy now, and has 10 more magic books in his account, which is a big gain. The Pure Blood family has been able to occupy a dominant position in the wizarding world for a long time. In addition to money, it is the profound magical knowledge they have accumulated from generation to generation. Just as the Ollivanders have always had a firm grasp on wand-making skills, their wands are more powerful than anyone else's. And the Potion family prince, that is, Snape's mother's family, has a lot of potions that are handed down from the family, and it is the dream prescription of many potion masters. Many pure-blood families hold their magical knowledge firmly in the hands of the family and do not share it with the outside world. Even in the Leeshen bookstore, which claims to be the most complete magic book in the UK, the books it sells are the most basic magic knowledge, and some advanced magic books will not appear here. Just like the standard spells book compiled by Miranda Goshawk, a must-have book for Hogwarts students in grades 1 to 7. But in fact, there are many advanced spells in the standard spells originally compiled by Goshawk. But the Ministry of Magic, in the name of the dangers of these spells, confiscated all orphaned copies of the first edition. Then had Miranda Goshawk remake a standard spell with most of the content cut out for publication. And those confiscated orphaned copies have all entered the bookcases of the major pure-blood families and will not be displayed to the public. Miranda Goshawk once expressed dissatisfaction with this. She is a pure scholar. In order to compile this magic book, she added many spells of the Goshawk family in it, just to share this knowledge. In the end, these books all went into the hands of the pure-blood family, making her hard work go to waste. The knowledge of the magic world is very precious, and all families can't wait to hide their family magic. The reason why the 4 founders who founded Hogwarts are admired is because they selflessly dedicated their magical knowledge and skills to the little wizards who came to learn for free in that era. Compared to the pure-blooded family who are still stingy today, they are extraordinarily noble. Even the notorious Salazar Slytherin, known as the Dark Wizard, who was born into the Slytherin family, contributed his family's magic to the establishment of Hogwarts. The first batch of magic books in the Hogwarts library was contributed by the 4 founders, and then slowly accumulated to the current volume of books on this basis. But there is still a lot of magical knowledge controlled by pure-blood families that has not been incorporated into the library. So Peter is looking forward to the books that are treasured by these pure-blood families. After signing the contract, Mrs. Derek, with a gloomy face, pulled Derek to the fireplace, grabbed a handful of flue powder by the fireplace, and said to Snape, "Professor Snape, I'll take Derek home tonight first. When he comes back tomorrow, I will let him bring 10 magic books." After speaking, he walked directly to the fireplace, threw flue powder at his feet and shouted, "Derek Manor." The two disappeared into the fireplace directly accompanied by a burst of green flames. 3. After watching the two of them leave, Snape raised his eyebrows and said to Peter, "It seems that you can succeed even without me today. You are very good to be able to suppress the momentum of a pure-blood family controller. It seems that the branch hat and 020 are not wrong." 55. After Derek's family left, Peter's aura subsided and returned to the appearance of a little boy. He said humbly, "Actually, I was able to negotiate successfully because of your existence, Professor, so she didn't dare to go too far. Ellen White gave me I said that Mrs. Derek was a Death Eater, and if it wasn't for teaching you, I wouldn't be so confident." 95. Snape was stunned for a moment, his eyes dimmed a little. "Death Eaters, aren't you afraid that I will be bought by them?" Peter noticed Snape's mood change and guessed he was thinking about his own Death Eater status. His eyes crossed the hand hidden in the black robe without a trace. Then he smiled and said, "How is it possible, Professor? You are a master of potions, and you are the dean of our academy. Of course I believe you." Peter got up and said goodbye to Snape. Professor Flitwick invited me to join the spell club. I need to join, please allow me to say goodbye first." Snape waved and motioned for him to leave. And finally said, "Since you know that Mrs. Derek is a Death Eater, you must be vigilant against her. You have offended her, and her previous threats may become true. So if you don't want to die, don't run around. Do you know?" "Got it, Professor. Thanks for the reminder," Peter said solemnly. Episode 83, Questions, Ravenclaw Common Room. After leaving the potions office, Peter went to the auditorium for dinner. The club's time was 7 o'clock in the evening, and it was already 6:30. As soon as he came to Slytherin's long table, many people took the initiative to greet him, and some people greeted him cordially. Peter sat down beside Alan in a bit of shock. Today's dish was Italian food. Peter took out a piece of pizza, a piece of macaroni, and Italian-style grilled fish from the big plate, and hurriedly ate it. Seeing the surprised expression of his roommate, Alan asked with a smile, "Do you feel that the people at Slytherin treat you differently today than they used to be?" Peter nodded as he ate. "That's because they saw your strength and talent from the duel," Alan said sharply. "Although Slytherin pays attention to blood, the most important thing is strength. Wandless magic reverses the situation and makes them feel that you are a very worthwhile target. That's why they change their attitude." 35. Suddenly, Peter didn't have a problem with this kind of behavior, because many people do it. Since they want to befriend themselves, of course he will not refuse, although he will not regard these people as true friends, but at least they are better than enemies. Prefect Chris Jones came up to Peter and said with a smile, "Congratulations on your entry into the Spells Club. Flitwick should have told you that I am also a member of the club. The club time is at the Ravenclaw Public Library at 7 o'clock. I need me waiting for you?" After Peter swallowed the food in his mouth, he said, "Thank you, Senior Jones. You don't have to wait for me, I'll be there in a while, you go first." Chris Jones nodded and said kindly, "You can call me Chris, there are only 2 Slytherin students in the club, and we will take care of each other in the future. By the way, Ravenclaw does not have a password, so if you want to get in, you have to answer the questions on the door panel, and you will be allowed to enter if you answer correctly. You should answer it easily. Don't worry if the answer is wrong, just wait and you can come in with the Ravenclaw students." "Thank you, Chris. I'll remember it," Peter said gratefully. In fact, he already knew this, but since it was someone else's kindness, then it's good to go. Prefect Chris Jones left with satisfaction. Alan White looked at Peter enviously and said, "The Spell Club, if you didn't say it, I wouldn't even know that this club existed. Professor Flitwick only invited you and Chris Jones, obviously this is a man with only spell talent. A club that only high people can enter. Tell me when you come back, I don't know what Ravenclaw is like." Peter agreed to Alan. Seeing that the time was a little short, he hurriedly accelerated the speed of eating, but the habit he had developed for a long time made him still look elegant at this time, and he couldn't see the anxious look at all. After finishing the food, Peter hurried to the Ravenclaw Tower with his school bag. Hurry up to the top of the tower. He walked to a door with an eagle-shaped bronze knocker, picked it up and knocked. Immediately, a gentle female voice came from the bronze door knocker and asked, "Is the phoenix first or the flame first?" When Peter heard this question, he raised his eyebrows at random and replied, "The two are circular, with no starting point." "Makes sense." The gentle voice sounded again, and the door opened immediately. Peter guessed that this voice should be Rowena Ravenclaw's voice. "It's really good." Coming to the lounge, instead of the Slytherin green and silver trim, blue and bronze are the dominant tones, and the walls are hung with silk drapery in both colors. The dome ceiling is painted with stars, and the dark blue carpet below is also full of stars, in contrast to each other. There are tables, chairs, and bookcases all around. And next to the door leading to the dormitory, stands a statue of Rowena Ravenclaw made of white marble. The statue is very beautiful, with a crown on its head, which is engraved with "Superhuman wisdom is the greatest wealth of mankind." Peter bowed respectfully to Ms. Ravenclaw. This wise lady has implemented her thoughts without setting secret words. As long as she can answer the questions set for her, Ravenclaw welcomes anyone. "I'm glad you recognized Ms. Ravenclaw." Professor Flitwick's voice came from behind Peter. Peter turned to look at Flitwick in surprise. "When did you come, Professor Flitwick? I didn't even notice you." 9. Flitwick looked at Peter with satisfaction, then looked at the statue behind Peter, and said with a sigh, "You are the first person I saw who bowed to Ms. Ravenclaw." When many people came to the lounge, their eyes you will be attracted by the surrounding scenery, so you will not notice the power of a line. Peter looked at Professor Flitwick, who was only about his waist, and said with a calm expression, "I agree with Rowena Ravenclaw's statement that superhuman wisdom is the greatest wealth of mankind. Because whether in the Muggle world or the magical world, only knowledge will not leave you. Human beings rely on extraordinary wisdom to stand above all things. Even in the magical world, many magical animals are more powerful than wizards, but in the end, wizards stand at the top. Because we learn and create a lot of magic with wisdom. And extraordinary wisdom requires the constant supply of knowledge." Hearing Peter's words, Professor Flitwick applauded happily and said regretfully, "It's a pity that you are not a student of our college. Many Ravenclaw students have never understood your opinion, and they are blindly immersed in it. In the book but never tried to get anything, became a nerd in the eyes of other colleges. But forgot the meaning of Ravenclaw as greedy raven. It is an endless demand for knowledge. Instead of holding a book or two." Peter smiled and comforted. Since Ms. Ravenclaw has set the door of the lounge to ask questions, it means that she welcomes all intelligent people, and doesn't care which house it is. Although I am not a student of Ravenclaw House, I am still Hogwarts. A member of, and also your student." Flitwick laughed and said relievedly, "You are right. Although many people say that Ms. Hufflepuff is the kindest, and is willing to accept many wizards that other colleges do not accept. But Ms. Ravenclaw is not so much, she welcomes anyone who seeks knowledge and wisdom. Let's go, the other students should be here, let's go to the library that belongs to Ravenclaw. Flitwick led Peter to a small arched door opposite the window, and said to him proudly, many people don't knowing that our college has a private library. Although it is small in size, it has a collection of books comparable to the Hogwarts library. I saw a library that is comparable to the size of the lounge space inside the small door. Although it is not as large as the library, many books are densely piled together, and the books basically occupy half of the space. It seems a bit crowded. Many Ravenclaw students stood quietly in the aisle, picked out the books they wanted to read, and sat silently on the long table by the wall to read. Episode 84, Greedy Raven, Professor Flitwick's Welcome Ceremony. Following Professor Flitwick through the long and narrow aisle, Peter looked at the books around him in surprise, and there was one more place for him to score points in the future. With the amount of books in the two libraries, he may not be able to learn it for decades. Seeing Peter's surprise, Flitwick smiled and said, "The books here are all left by previous students. Many students learn from each other and summarize their knowledge and leave it here. There are also many books donated by alumni, and even there's a Miss Ravenclaw's lab notes. So feel free to come here and read the book if you want to read it later, but after you read it, you must leave your opinion or summary, and the principle of knowledge equivalent exchange is followed here." Peter was amazed and admired the vision of the person who came up with this solution. If this goes on, the amount of knowledge in Ravenclaw's private library will probably gather more and more. Everyone will learn the corresponding knowledge from Ravenclaw, and then return a piece of knowledge to it. It really fits the meaning of the greedy raven. The pursuit of knowledge is really endless. Professor Flitwick told him that Rowena Ravenclaw also came up with this method. At the end of the Ravenclaw library, Professor Flitwick stopped on a wall. There is no door here. The blue wall is painted with a raven, which reads, "Superhuman wisdom is the greatest wealth of mankind." Flitwick turned to Peter and said, "Here is the entrance, you need to put your wand on the raven and say 020 knowledge is the ladder of human progress. The entrance to the club will appear." Peter asked in surprise, "Could that be what Ms. Ravenclaw said?" Flitwick smiled and shook his head. "This is what a student from the Muggle community in our college said. We think it makes sense, so we continue to use it." "Peter, you are also from the Muggle community, you should have heard this sentence?" Peter nodded and said, "This sentence was originally said by a Russian named Gorky. The original words were 'Books are the ladder of human progress,' and later it gradually became 'Knowledge is the ladder of human progress.'" Flitwick exclaimed, "Although Muggles do not have the help of magic, their pursuit of wisdom and knowledge has far surpassed that of wizards. Are you ready? We'll meet the other members soon, you're my first freshman, and they're already very curious about you," Flitwick said with a smile. Under the professor's encouraging eyes, Peter held his wand against the raven on the wall and said, "Knowledge is the ladder of human progress." As soon as the voice fell, the raven came to life and flew away from the spot, leaving a blank space to become a passage. Peter half-hunched into the passage, and after walking a few dozen steps, AC/DC, suddenly became enlightened. He had come to a very spacious room with huge glass windows on three sides. It was very bright and could see far into the distance through the windows. Black Lake and Forbidden Forest. In the room, on the left half against the wall, there is a rectangular wooden competition table, very similar to the duel table that was transformed by the prefect during Peter's duel. On the right half, there is a round wooden table in the middle surrounded by rows of sofas. At this time, 9 students were sitting on the sofa, looking at Peter who had just come in with interest. Flitwick followed closely, walked in, and then pulled Peter to introduce to the crowd, "This is Peter York, a first-year Slytherin student, who is very talented in magic, and will follow us to learn and explore the knowledge of magic spells." A Ravenclaw girl frowned and said, "Professor, is it a bit hasty for you to invite a freshman to join the club? We usually discuss advanced spells, and he may not understand it as a first year." Flitwick did not get angry because of the student's doubts, but explained kindly, "Don't underestimate him, although Peter is only a first year, he has already learned the knowledge of the first year. And he has the advanced magic super armor that can cast iron armor spells. Guard. This is what I've seen with my own eyes, very standard, and resists several hex attacks," Flitwick said exaggeratedly, and winked at Peter. Peter saw Professor Flitwick's expression, and immediately understood that when he hung Derek and Thomas, Professor Flitwick was still there. Slytherin Prefect Chris Jones, who was sitting on the sofa, also attested, "Peter fought a duel with a fourth-year student from our house, and won the opponent easily. And he can cast spells without a stick. Very good." 99. When the others heard it, they looked at Peter in surprise, and it was hard to believe that the person they were talking about was the little boy in front of him. Okay, let's all sit down. Although Professor Flitwick was the shortest among the people present, he was the most imposing. Peter, sit down with Jones, you are both from the same college and should be able to chat. Sit here. Chris Jones greeted Peter, I've always sat on this sofa by myself, and now you're here. After sitting down, Peter looked at all the members curiously, and then found a person he knew, Percy Weasley, a third-year Gryffindor, who was sitting across from him at this time. Startled for a moment, then nodded. Peter looked at the older brother of the Weasley twins and said, Percy, can I call you like this? Are you the only Gryffindor? I think most of the people here are from Ravenclaw. Percy Weasley knew that he, the Slytherin who played well with his twin brother, shook his head and said, Gryffindor and my brother Charlie, but he can't come today. Peter almost choked on his saliva when he heard it, and Charlie Weasley was knocked unconscious by Slytherin's batter in the morning. Isn't he still lying in the school infirmary? He felt a little embarrassed for a moment, so he had to give up and continue talking, and it seemed that Percy Weasley didn't want to talk to him too much. Peter turned to Prefect Jones and asked, Chris, what did Professor Flitwick usually talk about before? I only brought the standard spellbook, and I don't know what else to bring. You don't actually need to bring anything. We usually discuss the use of a certain spell, and everyone is like at a tea party, talking about new spells, or simplifying the steps to use spells. It's not too much. Seriously. Chris reached out and patted Peter on the shoulder. Then he said excitedly, sometimes when the interest comes, Professor Flitwick will teach us dueling skills. He was a duel champion when he was young. See the wooden platform on the other side, that is what Professor Flitwick used to teach us duels. Place. Professor Flitwick walked to the middle position, and a floating spell floated himself to the table. Even if he stood on the wooden table, he was only level with the students sitting on the sofa, but no one would laugh at him. Height. Let's warmly welcome Peter York to our club again. Professor Flitwick said happily, then held up his wand directly, and a stream of ribbons of flowers shot from the tip of the wand and fell around. Peter brushed the petals off his shoulders and asked Chris beside him in surprise, does Professor Flitwick often be so surprised? It's never been so grand. It seems that Professor Flitwick values you very much. Chris Jones also said with a look of surprise. In view of the new members joining today, we will have a special welcome ceremony tonight. Professor Flitwick flicked his wand and screamed and cheered, it's a duel match, everyone will participate. Episode 85, Duel Competition, Peter on the Field. When they heard that it was a duel match, everyone cheered, and more people liked this kind of practical class than the discussion in words. A Ravenclaw boy with a more active temper even hugged Professor Flitwick on the table excitedly. Lauren, let me down. Flitwick yelled sharply, but with a smile on his face, no reproach. The boy named Lauren took Professor Flitwick to the competition stage and looked at him expectantly. Seeing his expression, Flitwick said with a smile, in view of Lauren's disrespectful behavior just now, I will punish him for the last round. Oh no. Alan pleaded with an unacceptable expression of pain, Professor, I was wrong, you'd better let me play first. You also know that I don't have that much patience, waiting for this long, it will be tortured to death. No, it's time for you to grind your temper and frizz all day long. Flitwick refused with a smile. Everyone was amused by this boy. Seeing Peter being curious about this boy, Chris explained in a low voice, his name is Lauren Goshawk, a 7th grader at Ravenclaw, don't look at his frizzy appearance, but he is very talented in spells, and he is Professor Flitwick. One of my favorite students. That's the Goshawk you thought. His grandmother is Miranda Goshawk, the editor of our standard spellbook for grades 1 to 7. Seeing Peter's expression of wanting to ask after thinking of something, Chris said directly. Peter looked at this lively Ravenclaw student in surprise. It turned out that there was still genetic talent. He was very curious about the performance of this Goshawk. We just had 10 people here today, and we can just divide into 2 groups. I am the referee, and everyone can combine freely. Professor Flitwick stood on the stage and announced to everyone. Everyone started to form their own groups, but Peter was too young, so the seniors ignored him, and even Chris was directly invited by a Ravenclaw girl to form a team. There was only Percy Weasley, a third-year student in the second smallest, standing there as alone as Peter. Flitwick looked at the two and said, oh, Mr. Weasley, you are Peter's opponent today. The two stood together with big eyes and small eyes, especially Percy Weasley, pursed his lips and said nothing. He thought that he was 2 years older than Peter, and even if he won, he would not be able to win. As for the previous Flitwick, when the professor complimented Peter, he didn't take it seriously. "Let's play a group first, and show our new members how to duel," Flitwick said, looking at the 10 students in the audience. Then, ignoring Lauren Goshawk, who had been raising his hands high, he pointed to the 2 6th graders beside him, Alex and Magellan. "Come up and show the new members." The 2 people who were called came to the stage happily and stood opposite each other on both sides of the wooden platform. "Come on, first bow to each other," said Flitwick, standing between the 2. Hearing the words, the 2 slowly came to the middle position, raised their wands and bowed to each other. Then turn around and walk to both sides, and when you reach a suitable position, turn around instantly and use your wand to face each other. Remember, gentlemen, that our duel matches can only use the contents of the standard spellbook, and can't use other spells, let alone powerful curses," Flitwick said with a serious face. Then, with a spark from the tip of the wand, Flitwick screamed, "Go!" As soon as the words fell, the 2 6th grade students standing on both sides directly chanted the spell "Remove your weapon." Look! They both chose the disarming spell at the beginning. In fact, when we were dueling, the most effective way was to launch the disarming spell. In this way, the opponent's spell can be removed as quickly as possible, and victory can be scheduled by then. "That's it," Professor Flitwick explained excitedly. "This is not necessarily." Standing beside the female opponent of choice, Chris shook his head and said, "Isn't what the professor said incorrect? I took the wand, and I couldn't cast a single spell. Isn't it already scheduled to win?" The Ravenclaw girl next to Chris frowned, feeling that Chris was finding fault. Chris looked at the girl's expression and explained, "It's true in general, but it's not very useful when you meet some guys." He pointed to Peter, who was watching the game on the side, and said, "His guy, he was caught in front of him." The man disarmed his wand, and as a result, he directly cast a spell without a wand and recalled the wand, turning defeat into victory. At that time, all Slytherin people were shocked to drop their jaws. 0. Ask for flowers. The girl was surprised when she listened to Chris's words and looked in disbelief. They began to learn silent spellcasting in 6th and 7th grade, but in fact very few of them were really successful. At most, on basic spells such as floating spells, silent spellcasting was successfully achieved. As for wandless magic, it is the patent of very few wizards, and wizards like Professor Flitwick, who are second only to Dumbledore's strength, only know a few simple wandless magic, but they are proud enough. After all, great wizards like Dumbledore and Voldemort can't cast spells completely without wands. The fight on the stage was very exciting. Both of them were seniors, and both were invited to join the club by Flitwick because of their extraordinary talents, so even under the restrictions of the rules, they could only use basic spells. But still able to constantly change the spell, while constantly dodging, the two are evenly matched. 0-0. In the end, because one of the students wanted to be handsome, he was directly disarmed by the opponent and disarmed his wand. Clap clap clap. Everyone applauds the wonderful showdown between the two. The students who lost were not unhappy, and they walked down the stage happily with their opponents. "Very good, Alex and Magellan have contributed a wonderful duel for us," Flitwick said excitedly, changing the subject, of course if Alex can forget his narcissistic instinct, even more so. "All right." Alex, who lost the duel just now, did not feel ashamed at all, narcissistically smoothed his hair to one side, and then said cheekily, "Professor, you know this is impossible, my hairstyle is much more important than this." Everyone laughed. This Alex and Goshawk in Ravenclaw are known as the funny duo, one is sloppy, the other is narcissistic, but they are all very good, occupying the first place in their respective grades all the year round. Name location. Flitwick shook his head helplessly, then looked at the audience. "Okay, the demonstration group has been completed, then we will invite our new member Peter and third-year Weasley to play the second game." Then he specifically looked at Peter. "Remember, you can't use spells other than standard spell textbooks, especially advanced spells such as super armor and body protection. Go." Episode 86. Defeating Percy, Professor Flitwick's Intentions. On the stage, Peter and Percy Weasley looked at each other. "I won't let you," Percy said, looking at Peter, his eyes full of desire for victory. Peter was a little stunned. Unlike the other members of the Weasley family, this Percy was ambitious and perhaps more suitable for Slytherin. Excellent grades, very hungry for power. In the original timeline, he successfully entered the Ministry of Magic after graduation in Harry Potter's 4th grade Goblet of Fire, but gradually lost himself in the pursuit of power, and even stood in the Ministry of Magic for a time, breaking with his family. In the end, it was only when the Ministry of Magic fell and the people betrayed each other that he came to his senses, returned home to admit his mistake, and finally reconciled with his family. In the final battle, relying on his high attainments in magic spells, he defeated the Death Eaters in a row. At this time, Percy was not the future student council president. He was only 2 years older than Peter in the 3rd grade, but he had already shown his desire for power. Yes. I kept writing letters to the president of the student council during the summer vacation asking how to become a prefect. The flattering tone of 020 almost made me vomit. Okay, both sides start bowing, then back to both sides, and when I say start, fire the spell. Professor Flitwick stood in the middle this time, trying to ensure the safety of the duel between the two. After the two bowed obediently to each other, they quickly walked to the corresponding positions, picked up their wands and confronted each other. Go! Professor Flitwick shouted. Peter did not underestimate Percy Weasley. Although this guy has excess power, he will be admitted to the Ministry of Magic with 12 OS, excellent, in the future, becoming the 2nd person to get 12 OS after Bill Weasley. Students with grades. After he directly cast the disarming charm twice in a row, he jumped off the ground and erected the iron armor charm on himself to resist Percy's attack. Percy deserved to be a student who could be invited by Professor Flitwick. He nimbly avoided Peter's 2 disarming charms, and then directly set up an iron armor charm for himself. Iron spells are part of the 5th grade curriculum, but Percy apparently uses them too. Although it still looks a little unfamiliar, it is already very powerful compared to many adult wizards who can't even cast a decent iron armor spell. However, in comparison, Percy at this time was still very immature, especially when Peter killed a group of 8-eyed giant spiders in the Forbidden Forest in the afternoon, so Peter, who had changed his mind, seemed very resolute at this time. Without pausing, after several consecutive disarming spells and petrification spells, a silent stun spell was mixed in, directly hitting Percy who was unprepared, causing him to fall asleep. Flitwick watched the whole time, and as soon as he saw Percy being hit by the spell, he cast a spell to keep the sleepy Percy from falling heavily, and then used the quick recovery spell to wake him up. What a wonderful scene! Peter York hit his opponent with a silent stunning charm after firing a burst of disarming charms and won. Flitwick said happily, then looked at Percy, who was disappointed. Of course, our Mr. Weasley is also very good. He can counterattack in time after dodging Peter's magic attacks in a row. Even if I am not careful, I may be hit. What's more, Peter York uses silent casting. Let we applaud them. Clap clap. The onlookers applauded sincerely. Even Percy Weasley, who lost, didn't have such strength at the same age. Not to mention Peter York, who is only in the 1st grade now, directly made them feel the huge gap. They are still working hard to contact the silent spell, but they did not expect that a 1st-year student would have completed this goal earlier than them. Peter stepped down with the lost Percy and continued to watch the other seniors play. Suddenly, a look of joy appeared on Peter's face. It turned out that the system rewarded him with 5 points for the duel match just now. He didn't expect to be able to get so many points in just one match, which is equivalent to the content of 5 books he read carefully. Points earned. Watching the duel on the field, Peter's eyes lit up, and now he can't wait to jump on the stage to play a few more games and earn enough points. The next few games are very exciting. These senior students are the most talented people in magic spells. Even the simplest spells, they can use tricks, and their power is no worse than advanced spells. For example, one of the students of Hufflepuff in the 7th grade, he made him perfect with just a floating spell, and finally directly floated the opponent in mid-air, constantly spinning somersaults, directly making the opponent unable to bear and choosing to admit defeat. In the end, it was Lauren Goshawk's turn and his opponent. Both were 7th graders, but Lauren's strength was obviously superior. His spellcasting speed and uninterrupted spell casting far surpassed everyone else's. You can even turn the released spell to avoid the armor spell in front. His opponent was obviously aware of this ability, and he was well prepared, but he was still embarrassed by this arc-shaped casting trajectory. Because the iron armor spell couldn't fully work, he could only keep jumping and dodging the spell's attack. But in the end, because of lack of physical strength, he was hit by a petrification spell. Thank you too for showing us a wonderful duel. We saw that Lauren Goshawk's spell casting skills are very difficult to deal with. Even if we release the iron armor spell in advance, Lauren's magical attack can turn, making it hard to prevent. His opponent is also restricted by the rules, and there is no way to effectively resist the attack. Flitwick explained excitedly. After watching these few games, Peter felt that his horizons had broadened a lot. He used to learn magic, and he was pursuing high-level magic spells with great power, and he only needed to be able to use basic spells. But obviously he was wrong. These senior students may not be able to match Peter Zero in advanced spells and even wandless casting. But in terms of skill, Peter at this time is a long way from them. Under the restrictions of the rules, these senior students can still use the basic spells to perfection, use the least magic power consumption, and play the most beautiful victory. And Peter is only using magic superficially. If he wants to go further on the road of magic in the future, he must study those basic spells that he ignores, instead of blindly pursuing powerful spells. Peter somehow understood why Professor Flitwick held a duel match when he first came to the club. I am afraid that he has found that Peter has gone astray in the spell. After all, these days, Peter is almost only staring at the advanced spells on the spell notes, completely ignoring the basic spell knowledge in the previous part. And these senior students have their own views on magic spells and certain attainments, especially after the rules are defined. The use of magic skills is more prominent among senior students. This also provides guidance for Peter's future research direction of magic spells, instead of having no direction at all like before. But it wasn't the time for Peter to think about this, when he saw Lauren Goshawk standing proudly on the stage and said, "Who else is going to challenge me? If I win, I taught him that magic corner trick just now." 99. Professor Flitwick asked in surprise, "Lauren, are you serious? You must know that such spellcasting skills are very important, and you are willing to give them?" Lauren said indifferently, "My grandma said that knowledge can only be brought to life when it is shared, instead of hiding it and waiting for it to decay. That's why she spent a lot of time and energy compiling the original version of standard spells. It's just a pity that it was the Ministry of Magic confiscated it, and it went into the belly of those greedy people," Lauren said with a disgusting expression on her face. Alas, Miranda is indeed a very respectable 3.2 lady. The standard spellbook she gave me is still treasured by me. I really hope her spellbook can be seen again," Flitwick said with a sigh. The magical world is closed-minded, and the pure-blooded families all want to take magic as their own, and even covet other people's magical knowledge. Open-minded people like Miranda Goshawk, who are willing to share their magic with others, are attacked by them as aliens. Flitwick retracted his thoughts, smiled and said to the people in the audience, "Since Lauren has said so, who of you are willing to come up and challenge him? It doesn't matter if you lose, as long as you win, you can get his spellcasting skills." Very rare thing. The people in the audience looked at each other and were eager to move. They all knew the importance of these spellcasting skills. Of course, they didn't have much confidence. They had been with each other for at least a year and knew each other's strength. "Can I try it?" A clear voice came. Everyone looked around and saw that Peter raised his hand. Episode 87, Fight Without Rules, Evenly Matched. Professor Flitwick was also a little surprised and asked, "Peter, are you sure? There are no rules for this competition. Lauren is a 7th grade student, and he has a family background. He can use almost all spells. Your advanced spells, but there is no advantage." Peter said shyly, "Professor, I want to try. These days, I am a little too pursuing those powerful spells. But now the seniors have given me a different point of view, so I want to experience their magic." 35. When Flitwick heard this, he looked at him with great relief. "It's good for you to think so. These days I've watched you continue to study those advanced magics, and I feel a little regretful that I gave you my spell notebook too soon, worrying that you will just keep going. Pursue those powerful spells. Since you want to experience their strength, then compare with Lauren. It doesn't matter if you lose. After all, he is about to graduate and is already an adult wizard." Flitwick said happily. "Oh, Professor, did you give him the spell notebook so early? I begged you for 2 years before you lent me the notebook. It's so unfair." Lauren Goshawk complained with a funny-faced Dow, and was also surprised that Professor Flitwick attached great importance to Peter. "You impatient guy, you can't stop sooner or later like a sniff. If I gave you the spell note early, I would thank Merlin if you didn't blow up the Ravenclaw Tower." Flitwick laughed and scolded. Obviously he was talking. Lauren is very close. "Okay, since Peter raised his hand first, let him compete with Lauren," Flitwick announced, then looked at Lauren and asked with a smile, "What's your opinion? The graders challenge you?" Lauren looked at the little boy below and said with a smile, "I said just now that I will accept everyone's challenges, and of course he is no exception. Don't worry, Professor, I will return you a sound Peter York." Then he bowed his head and said to Peter, "Little brother, don't worry. I won't use those dangerous magics. You have to do your best. Obviously, he was very confident in his own strength, but he just thought that training with him would be taken care of new member. I'll do my best, Peter said shyly, looking harmless. This made Chris Jones, who had seen Peter's majesty in Slytherin, twitch at the corners of his mouth. He always felt that Lauren would suffer this time. Although Flitwick knew that Peter could master the upgraded version of the Iron Armor spell, as well as a few wandless magic, he also felt that Peter had no chance of winning, so when Peter came to the stage, he reached out and patted him on the shoulder, comforting, "This time I will do it. It's to gain experience, don't worry, although Lauren is usually reckless, she is very reliable at critical times and won't hurt you." On the stage, Peter and Lauren faced off against each other, but the picture was a bit funny, because the difference in body shape between the two was too great. Lauren is an adult, about 1.9 meters tall and muscular. And Peter was only 11 years old at this time, and his body had not developed rapidly, and his height was only about Lauren's waist. The two stood together and had a serious duel, but the atmosphere was very funny. Lauren also said with a smile, "You attack me first, it is my care for the new members, I will not be polite later." Peter looked at the proud student of Professor Flitwick in front of him, but he didn't dare to relax. Since watching these senior duel matches just now, he has already had a lot of ideas in his mind, and now he is ready to give it a try. Since Lauren wanted to let himself, Peter accepted it bluntly. He directly swarmed a flock of birds, summoned a group of birds out of thin air, and then said 10,000 bullets. Such Lauren. Peter's two spells were fired in succession, and the speed was so fast that everyone couldn't react, so that Lauren, who had a relaxed expression on his face, quickly became serious and blocked it with an iron armor spell. But the number of these birds was a bit large, and they slammed into the iron armor curse barrier overwhelmingly, causing the barrier to make a bouncing sound and blocking Lauren's vision in front of him. At this moment, Peter tapped himself with his wand, and then he quickly disappeared in the eyes of everyone. Merlin. He can actually know the phantom body spell. Even a 6th grader of me can't, this is too shocking, one of the students in the audience exclaimed, full of disbelief, the phantom body spell is arrogant. The spell that Luobai learned, but he was only 11 years old. Did he learn it in the womb? 5. Lauren quickly solved the birds that besieged him, and found that Peter was no longer on the stage. He was stunned for a moment, then realized it in an instant, and shouted in surprise, "It's the illusory charm." He didn't know the super armor and body protection spell, but he still quickly cast a few iron armor spells in a row to surround himself and beware of the opponent's sneak attack. Sure enough, when he just said armor protection, a few disarming spells shot at him, and slammed into the newly arranged protective cover. Lauren didn't show any weakness, and directly fired a few whole-body restraint spells in the direction from which the disarming spell was sent. But they were all empty, and obviously the invisible Peter was no longer in his original position. Then he shot a few sleeping curses out of thin air from the other direction, and was evaded by Lauren, and then just 2 petrification spells counterattacked. The two were directly evenly matched, and they fought back and forth, which surprised the members of the audience and expressed their excitement again and again. Although Chris made psychological preparations in advance, he was still shocked by this scene. He didn't expect his junior to learn the illusory body charm. Then he saw the stunned expression of Ravenclaw's female teammate 020, and asked with a wry smile, "This time you should believe what I said earlier that you can't underestimate him. You see he has the upper hand in the showdown with Lauren now. If Lauren can't break Peter's disillusionment charm, he will be successfully attacked sooner or later." The Ravenclaw girls stared blankly at the duel competition on the stage, only spit out the word pervert. Professor Flitwick stood on the side at this time, watching the game going back and forth in surprise. He was so excited that he didn't know what to say. Lauren's strength understood, but he didn't expect Peter to give him such a big deal surprise. As Peter's teacher, of course he knew that the previous Peter had always been a straight and rude style of play, focusing on pressing people with power. But now he has changed his style of play, focusing on the most effective method. And these changes were made after watching the duel of the senior students just now. This shows that Peter really understands his intentions, and super strong learning ability, quickly integrate these newly learned skills. Now he can still compete with the best of the 7th grade students. Flitwick, as a teacher, is of course very happy that the students can perform like this, and once again complained in his heart that Snape took a big advantage, and let Slytherin have such a gifted student. Episode 88. Wonderful duel match, win. Percy Weasley was still haunted by the fact that he lost to Peter, but now watching the wonderful showdown on stage, he was very shocked. The original dissatisfaction disappeared. When a person is stronger than you, you may be dissatisfied and jealous, but if you are far surpassed, there is only admiration left. He no longer thinks that his two younger brothers and Peter of Slytherin will have a bad relationship. Peter York, who is so talented and powerful, may become a big man like Dumbledore in the future, so he wants to befriend Peter himself. And a little regret that he didn't pay attention to Peter just now. The repeated magical attacks of the two left the wooden competition table full of holes and saw shavings flying. But then when he saw the sawdust all over the ground, his eyes lit up, and he directly said, "Flying sand and moving stones." Then there was a gust of wind in the room, which directly rolled up the wood dust on the ground and rushed towards the opposite position where Peter was. Although the phantom body spell can effectively deceive vision, it still has some limitations. So soon, in the sawdust dust, Peter's transparent figure clearly appeared in sight. Lauren finally showed a smile, and immediately sent out a few words, "Accept your weapons." All petrified. At this time, he dared not underestimate the little boy on the opposite side, and wanted to defeat Peter as soon as possible. After exposing his figure, Peter was not too disappointed. He avoided Lauren's attack and directly summoned a snake with oolong, and then used quickly grow on the snake to make a wrist thicker. The black snake, enlarged into a terrifying giant snake as thick as a bucket, charged towards Lauren with its fangs open. Lauren was taken aback by this giant snake. He directly smashed the snake's tail into pieces, and the giant snake's tail was blasted with a big hole. The pained giant snake got angry and went around Lauren's body, trying to wrap it tightly. The giant snake, which was enlarged by the magnifying spell, was so powerful that it squeezed Lauren's protective cover a little out of shape. It seemed that it was about to be shattered at any time. The people under the stage were also frightened by the sudden appearance of the giant snake, and they all stayed away from the competition stage. Especially the old Claus girl, who was most afraid of snakes, hid behind Chris and complained, "What's wrong with him? He wants to become a snake. Isn't this scary?" Chris accepted it well and exclaimed in admiration, "This is very good. Why didn't I think of this trick before? Using the combination of oolong out of the hole and the big change charm, you can make such a big snake. Use help is perfect." When Lauren finally got rid of the entanglement and used the shrinking curse to turn the giant snake back into its original shape, Peter, who had been waiting for a long time, directly attacked with 2 petrification spells. Lauren threw 2 spells in the air with ease. When he was about to fight back, he found that his feet could not move. When he looked down, he found that the wooden boards under his feet had softened strangely, as if they were stuck in the mud, unable to move. While he cast the petrification spell on Lauren, he quietly used silent magic on the wooden board under his feet, a member of the audience exclaimed. Seeing that Lauren was successfully trapped, Peter chased after the victory and threw a series of spells out, preventing him from getting out of the trap for a while. Although Lauren was stuck in the mud, he still used his superb skills to easily deal with the overwhelming spell attack. It's just that he didn't notice that there was a thin rope behind him, as if alive, quietly came behind Lauren. All the onlookers noticed Peter's intention and immediately closed their breaths, quietly looking at the string. No one would remind Lauren, because it was a fair fight. The magic spell was constantly thrown between the two, and the sparks were shining, which was very spectacular. Suddenly, Peter stopped in place, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. With a wave of his wand in his hand, he said, "Bound all over." As soon as the voice fell, Lauren, who felt bad, just wanted to start, and the string lying behind him quickly wrapped him up, unable to move his entire body. With Peter's voice, "Accept your weapon," the wand in his hand broke free and fell into Peter's hand on the opposite side. So far, Peter has won the duel match. Clap, clap, clap. Everyone in the audience applauded excitedly. Wonderful. It's wonderful. Professor Flitwick stood on the stage, lifted the spell on Lauren, and said excitedly, "This is the best duel match I've ever held." Even with international wizards, the dueling competition is as exciting as it is. In their duel, they didn't use too many advanced spells. They only relied on superb technology to make the basic spells glow with different vitality. As I have always emphasized, magic is never the strongest, only the most suitable. Yes. Flitwick blushed with excitement and danced, and the wand in his hand kept sparking, showing his mood. Peter walked up to Lauren and gave him his clutch back. "Senior Goshawk, your wand." 35. "Peter, can I call you that?" Lauren took over her wand and looked at the boy who was 7 years younger than herself for the first time, with sighs on her face. "You are really amazing. Successfully beat me. I was your age, but I was still complacent that I had mastered a petrification spell. I used to think I was a genius, but you taught me what real talent is. Of course, Senior Goshawk. Peter said with a smile. He could see that although Lauren Goshawk was a little disappointed, there was no gloom in his eyes, and he accepted his failure calmly. I think this is a very worthwhile appointment, Manpower. Call me Lauren. Lauren Goshawk said cheerfully, then with a wave of his wand, a dark blue notebook flew over from where he was sitting, took the notebook, and Lauren handed it to Peter. This is what you deserve. It has my detailed discussion on the magic attack and turning. This is what I have achieved for many years, you can use it well. If you don't understand, you can come to me and ask, or send me a letter. Looking at the notebook, Peter looked up at Lauren, the cheerful 7th grade Ravenclaw senior, with no reluctance in his eyes, as if he was just giving him an unimportant book. Take it, Peter. Flitwick said softly, stepping forward. Lauren is about to graduate now, and this notebook won't be of much use to him. And the Goshawks are a family that loves to share knowledge. If it is useful to you, when they need help in the future, just go and help. Yes, take it. Lauren shoved the notebook directly into Peter's arms, and said with a smile, I am determined to be like my grandmother in the future, to collect and organize all kinds of spells from all over the world, then compile a spell encyclopedia. You are so powerful, I believe you can even create new magic spells in the future. Just remember to add it to my spell encyclopedia. When Peter heard his ambition, he was very surprised. He didn't expect that this senior with a cheerful personality would have such a grand ambition. Immediately, he cherished the notebook and said admiringly, Senior Lauren, if you want to start your grand goal, please remember to inform me. 99. This guy Lauren refused the invitation of the Ministry of Magic. He plans to learn knowledge from his grandma Miranda Goshawk in the years after graduation. When he is ready, he will set off and travel around the world to spend years collecting spell knowledge. Flitwick's introduction seemed to complain, but the smug look on his face showed that he was very supportive of his favorite protégé's decision. Episode 89. The Gap with Peter, the approval of the members. Seeing that the notebook was obtained by Peter, everyone looked at him enviously, and then a student in the 6th grade felt that he could do it, and said to Lauren, you just said, as long as you can win, you can get your spellcasting skills, but have now been acquired by Peter. What if the rest of us want to challenge you? Lauren suddenly laughed angrily. Does this 6th grade student think that he lost to Peter, so he thinks he can beat himself like Peter? He said angrily, if you want to challenge me, you can continue. In my head, as long as you beat me, you can also get it. How do you want to come? As soon as the words fell, some of them jumped and tried, especially the 6th grade boy who asked the question just now, raised his hand and wanted to be the first to take the stage. It's up to you. Adolph Taylor, since you're so active, come up. Others can wait first. Lauren pointed the boy's name funny. Professor Flitwick stood aside and looked at it with a small huh, without any intention of interfering. Several people in the 7th grade are very aware of Lauren's strength, so they have no intention of challenging. Several 0-20 people gathered together, watching the boys excitedly taking the stage as if they were having fun. One of them gloated, this Tyler is going to be out of luck. He thought Lauren was a bully? Seeing Lauren get beat by a 1st grader, do you really think Lauren is weak? Another 7th grader looked at Peter not far away and exclaimed in admiration, the most shocking thing is Peter York, when he was brought by Professor Flitwick at first, I thought he was only invited by the professor because of his talent. Entered the club, but I didn't expect his strength to be so powerful. Although there were some factors that Lauren despised in the fight just now, he defeated Lauren in a dignified manner. I have dueled with Lauren so many times, but I have never won. All I can do is call him a freak. Several other 7th graders agreed, arguing that they were the best among their peers themselves, but dwarfed by Peter. Just before they finished talking, the two on stage officially started the game. Obviously, Adolph Taylor, who was full of self-confidence, was crushed by Lauren directly at the beginning, and magic after another attacked him continuously, so that he could only resist the attack with iron armor. But Lauren's spell was overwhelming, making his iron armor spell on the verge of collapse. Soon, the shield of the iron armor spell was defeated by a spell, dissipating like glass shattered. Taylor, who had no shelter, was directly attacked by a spell. Hit by several petrification spells and mischief spells in a row, it is as motionless as a stone, and the front teeth grow directly to the ground, and the hair on the head turns green. Very funny. Lauren, who quickly ended the battle, lifted the spell on her opponent with a refreshing look, and then asked again, who else is going to challenge me? Adolph Taylor stepped off the stage gloomily, and in the eyes of everyone watching the play, his face flushed and shrank to one side. Originally came to the stage full of confidence, but he was crushed and defeated in a short while. If it wasn't for Professor Flitwick, he would have wanted to run out and hide himself so that no one could find him. It's too embarrassing. The few people who were still eager to try have all died down at this time and have no idea of challenging. After all, Adolph Taylor's strength should not be underestimated, but he was still completely abused by Lauren. It proved his strength once again, and also let everyone clearly see Peter's strong strength. After all, he is the one who can defeat Lauren. No one is going to challenge Lauren anymore, and the duel match is officially over. Everyone sat back on the sofa again, but everyone was still reminiscing about the game just now, unable to calm down for a long time. Professor Flitwick stood on the wooden table and looked at everyone with a smile. It's very late now, the party should be over. But before leaving, I'll give everyone a task, and everyone will use the spell they are best at, practice well, and then think if you can continue to develop more uses. At the same time next week, we, AC/DC, will get together again to discuss research. Okay, bye Professor Flitwick. See you next week, Professor. The students packed up and said goodbye to Flitwick. Peter, wait. Flitwick called to Peter, who was about to go back with Chris. I hope you'll be able to book a copy of Spell Innovations. We'll be discussing the intellectual arguments on it most of the time. Magic Innovations? Is it a professional journal similar to Deformation Today? Peter asked in surprise. So far, he only knew that the most famous newspapers and periodicals in the wizarding world were the Daily Prophet, the Quibbler, Witcher Weekly, the Broomstick Book, and the highly professional Transformation Today, but he did not listen to it. Said the cursed journals. Innovation on Magical Charms is an international professional journal for charmsology, with a small audience, so you haven't heard of it. But there are a lot of insights from experts on charms, and newly invented spells appear from time to time, so eye-opening for you guys. Flitwick explained. As for how to book, you can ask Chris Jones next to you. They all ordered the journal early. I will, Professor. Peter promised. Professor Flitwick is the reviewer of the Magic Journal, and many of the papers published by magic experts are reviewed by him at the first time, so we can see these works at the first time. Chris introduced proudly. Peter looked at Professor Flitwick in amazement. He was really unbelievable. To be a reviewer for an international professional journal, you must first have a high reputation and strong professionalism. Speaking of which, Hogwarts teachers are indeed superior compared to other schools of magic. In addition to being known as the most powerful Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Professor of Transfiguration, is the premier Transfiguration Master, and he is often referred to as Transfiguration. Revised article in the professional journal Transformation Today. Potions Professor Snape is a master of potions and a member of the International Potions Society. Herbology Professor Sprout cultivates herbs of good quality, and she cultivates almost all the herbs in the school. In addition to her role in the school, Mrs. Hooch, the flight teacher, is also a professional advisor to the English Quidditch team. There is also Professor Flitwick, who was not only the champion of the duel competition when he was young, but now he is a reviewer of the Charms Journal, and he is also a master of charms, second only to Dumbledore. Therefore, Hogwarts is full of talents. Even Hagrid, who makes up the number, has a set of methods to take care of magical animals. Saying goodbye to Professor Flitwick, Peter and Chris walked down the Ravenclaw spiral staircase to head back to the Slytherin dormitory. The two were talking and laughing, and they were walking when they almost bumped into Professor Green, who suddenly appeared around the corner. Professor Green! Peter stopped and looked in surprise at a suitcase that Professor Green was carrying, and the suitcase kept vibrating, and there were living things shaking inside. Episode 90. Professor Green has a ghost? Talk to the Bloody Barrow. Professor Green, what are you doing in this box? Peter asked in surprise. Professor Green didn't expect to meet the students so late. His eyes were a little erratic, and then he explained calmly, "This is a boggart I caught. It's going to be used for teaching the third grade students next week." Then he asked back, "Why are you here? It's very late now." Peter looked at Professor Green suspiciously. He smelled a tinge of blood. Will it hurt to catch boggart? But he didn't think much and replied, "We went to Professor Flitwick's spell club, and we're back now." Green looked at Peter in surprise and asked, "Are you a first-year student? Are you invited by Professor Flitwick to the spell club?" Peter was not very active in defense against the dark arts class, so he not too impressed with Peter. Peter is very talented in spells, so he was attracted by Professor Flitwick. Chris replied for Peter, then glanced at Professor Green's box and said, "Professor, your boggart seems to be too active and needs my help." No. Green moved the suitcase slightly behind him, blocked it with his robe, and said solemnly, "It's almost time for curfew, you should hurry back. If I see you still outside, I will detain you." You score, then hurried away with the box. "There's a ghost," Peter said, squinting as he looked at Professor Green's disappearing figure. Hogwarts' defense against the dark arts, because of the curse, has to change a professor every year. And the people who will come to apply now are either idiots who don't know how to live or die, or people with bad intentions. But obviously Professor Green not an idiot, Chris said faintly, looking at the figure that had disappeared in the distance. Immediately, the conversation changed, "But this has nothing to do with us. We will be fine if we don't participate at will." Peter nodded. No matter what this Professor Green was doing, as long as it didn't affect him, he didn't bother to care. After all, the curse of this position is very powerful, and there are almost no good endings. The study time passed quickly. Peter spends the rest of the day in the library reading books and accumulating points except for class time. In the blink of an eye, it's Halloween. All the students were discussing the Halloween party tonight. After the last herbal medicine class of the afternoon, the students came out of the greenhouse to watch and excitedly discuss the Halloween costumes. Peter, Cedric, who was taking the herbal medicine class together, chased after him and said excitedly, "I just heard from our dean that Principal Dumbledore invited the skeleton band to perform." "Skull Band? Are they famous?" Peter asked curiously, not paying attention to these. "Definitely famous. They're second only to the Wacky Sisters, and my mom loves their style. She says the Wacky Sisters' rock songs give her a headache, but the skulls are soothing," Cedric said excitedly. "Then I'm really looking forward to it. I've never heard wizards' music before." Peter was also full of curiosity. After he came to Hogwarts, his focus was on magic, and he didn't know much about wizards' life. Peter has never had a wizard's Halloween, so he is looking forward to it. Especially the ghosts in the castle are very happy, thinking that today is their holiday, so they all dressed up grandly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Barrow. Are you going to the astronomy tower today?" Peter asked politely when he met the Bloody Barrow. The Bloody Barrow is the ghost of Slytherin. He is usually silent and his eyes are dull. He is described as withered. His robes are covered with silver blood, and he does not know whether it is his own or someone else's. Still wearing a pair of shackles on his hands, he always likes to be alone on the astronomical tower, looking at the Ravenclaw Tower and muttering to himself. The appearance of the Bloody Barrow is very scary, so even Slytherin students are very afraid of him. Usually, as long as the Bloody Barrow sits, a seat will be automatically vacated. But Peter knew a little about him. He knew that Barrow the Blood was Slytherin's first trainee, learning magic skills from Salazar Slytherin. During school, she fell in love with Helena Ravenclaw, Ms. Grey, but she didn't love Barrow. Later Helena Ravenclaw stole the crown and fled to the Albanian forest. Barrow is sent by Rowena Ravenclaw to find Helena, but Helena refuses to go back to school with Barrow and is killed by an angry Barrow. Then Barrow, who realized that he had killed the one he loved the most, stabbed himself with the knife that killed Helena. After their death, both returned to Hogwarts, and Helena became Lady Grey. Barrow was also known as Barrow the Blood because of his blood. Ms. Grey has always refused to meet Barrow because she hated Barrow for killing herself. And Barrow also put a pair of shackles on himself because of remorse, expressing repentance. Peter York? The Bloody Barrow focused his eyes, looked at the only Slytherin student in the first grade who was not afraid of himself, then shook his head and said hoarsely, "All ghosts will gather together on Halloween. Gryffindor's ghost Nick is going to be in the basement classroom. For a banquet, I need to go there." Peter looked at the ghost whose eyes were dull and full of pain, and couldn't help asking, "Mr. Barrow, the book says that ghosts are the marks left by wizards who are afraid of death and are unwilling to continue going down. What about you, are you? Are you afraid of death?" Afraid of death?" Sigh. Barrow smiled contemptuously, and then said painfully, "I chose death myself. But death does not accept my sinful soul. I live in eternal remorse, unable to ascend the train of death. 0. Ask for flowers." So, the ghost didn't appear because of fear of death, but because of the death of the obsessive wizard. Peter muttered to himself after thinking. "My teacher will be very happy if he sees you." Barrow the Blood Man looked at the handsome boy in front of him and couldn't help but say, "You are talented and eager to learn. I have heard many professors and ghosts talk about you." "Huh? Are you talking about Salazar Slytherin?" Peter asked in surprise. "Isn't it that Mr. Slytherin hates hemp wizards?" At the beginning, he quarreled with the other three founders for the reason of blood, and finally left Hogwarts. Course. Then how did you get into Slytherin? Barrow asked rhetorically. Because of ambition? Peter got stuck, unable to answer. Time is a wonderful and cruel thing, it changes many things. Barrow said hoarsely. At that time, the wizards had a hard time. Muggles were chasing wizards frantically, many little wizards all suffered. The four giants saw this and decided to build a school to teach and protect the little wizards. 0-0. But in choosing students, Slytherin and the other three had differences. At that time, Muggle beliefs were so terrifying that some Muggle wizards even believed that their magic power was possessed by the devil. Extremely concerned about their identity as a wizard reject. Until one time, Muggle troops stormed into the castle because of the betrayal of a young wizard. After this incident, Slytherin was extremely distrustful of Muggle wizards, because he thought these people were very unreliable and would betray them at any time. And Hogwarts at the time couldn't take such a risk. But the other three founders thought they couldn't kill everyone with one shot, and if they didn't take them in, these little wizards from the Muggle world would have nowhere to go, and they would even be burned to death by crazy Muggles. Because of the disagreement, the four founders decided to use their surnames as the names of the colleges and divide the students into different colleges. Point 35. So, Mr. Barrow, you mean that Slytherin cares about the status of the hemp student, not the bloodline? Peter was a little surprised. Barrow didn't speak and floated there quietly, staring blankly at the tower in the distance, muttering Helena. Seeing Barrow immersed in his own world again, Peter was a little helpless. Peter guessed that the bloody Barrow didn't want to deal with the reason for his death. I'm afraid it was Helena Ravenclaw. The obsession with guilt and admiration made him linger in the castle for nearly 1,000 years, begging for Helena's forgiveness. But obviously, Helena could not forgive the man who killed her. So there is never a day of relief. Next.